I am so grateful to welcome our friend and teacher, Howard Simon, to the Bima today to offer our Drash. So pleased to be here with you, Howard, and grateful to learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now, my voice is a little bit compromised today, so if it gives out completely mid-Drash, I will convert to interpretive dance. Will you join me, Rabbi?
Absolutely. I got you covered.
Let me know if you can't hear me, and maybe Andy can help. Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. In today's Parashat, Pekudei, the accounting, we read about the final preparations and dedication of the extravagant and ornate Mishkan in the desert and the crafting of the opulent priestly garments. We read as well an accounting of all that went into those projects and from whom the materials came and in what measure. But the Parsha in the Maftir describes how the presence of God would travel through the desert with Moses and the people. It's that extraordinary mystery that I want to talk about with you today. We read a couple of weeks ago about the molten calf the people made after Moses remained on the mountain longer than anticipated. We know that one interpretation as to why the people went so far in their distress as to create an idol was because in Egypt, the people had seen all gods represented in some kind of physical manifestation. Thus, without Moses to steady the people, it was hard for them to continue to accept a God who could not be seen. So when Moses remained too long on the mountain, the people's faith wavered, and in fear, they returned to the paganism with which they were familiar. We also know from that story that the mountain was shrouded in a mysterious cloud so that God's presence couldn't be seen by anyone other than Moses. That cloud reappears in today's Parsha and represents an interesting compromise between the people's need for reassurance that God was with them and God's unseeable, unknowable presence. In the Maftir, we read that once the work of the Mishkan was completed, a cloud covered the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and that the presence of God, Kavod Adonai, filled the Mishkan, that Moses could not enter the Ohel Moed while the cloud had settled on it and God's presence was within it, that the people could set out on their continuing journey only when the cloud had lifted, and that throughout the night, instead of the cloud, fire would appear in the Mishkan so that all the house of Israel could see it. So this is the compromise. Because the people still were unaccustomed to a single invisible God, Moses understood that they needed to be able to see something, even if it couldn't be God's panim, God's face. So God's presence would be in the Mishkan with the people, but always hidden behind a cloud or a pillar of fire. What strikes me is that throughout both today's narrative and the molten calf story, the presence of God, Kavod Adonai, is described as simultaneously hidden and present, on the mountain or in the Mishkan, always hidden, but always there. What are we to make of a God who hides in plain sight? There's a parallel here to the creation myth told by Reb Isaac Luria of Sfat, known as the Holy Ari, the 16th century mystic and founder of what we now call Kabbalism, the main branch of it. In Luria's myth, creation presents an inherent problem. Because God fills the universe wholly and completely, God had no available physical space in which to put the world. For that reason, the Ari taught, in order for creation to occur, God first had to self-contract. The Hebrew word is tzimtzum, to create the halal hapnui, the empty space, into which God could pour the divine light of creation. Now, many commentators have pointed out the inherent flaw in this story. As Rabbi Nachum of Bretzlav, the Ari's great-grandson, said, only in the future will it be possible to understand the tzimtzum that brought the empty space into being. We have to say of it two contradictory things. One, that the empty space came about through the Tzimtzum, where, as it were, God withdrew his presence from that place, and it is as if in that place there is no God. And two, the absolute truth that God's presence must nevertheless be in that space, for certainly nothing can exist without God giving it life. So how are we to resolve this essential dilemma that in the Lurianic creation story, God had to withdraw from the empty space so as to enable creation, while by definition always being in all spaces at all times? Luria found the solution in further myth, the Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, which describes how, as part of the Tzimtzum, God created holy vessels in the empty space, into which God poured the divine light of creation, thus continuing God's presence in that space. But the vessels weren't strong enough to hold the divine light of creation and shattered, leaving broken shards and sparks of God's light hidden throughout the world. That left humanity with the task of tikkun olam, the repair of the world, of raising through mitzvot and acts of hesed, loving kindness, the sparks of divine light, thereby healing the world and making creation whole as God intended. In Lurianic theology, once humans have completed this task, the Mashiach will come to acknowledge our repair of the world, to celebrate with us, and to usher in the Messianic age. Lurianic Messianism differs fundamentally from its Christian parallel. Generally, in Christian Messianism, Jesus will return on the day of judgment at a time of catastrophic upheaval and separate the believers, who will experience the rapture, from the non-believers, who will be condemned. In many Christian, particularly Pentecostalist traditions, the Jews, however, being God's first chosen people, will not immediately be judged. Rather, after having been ingathered in Jerusalem as prophesied in the book of Daniel, the Jews first will be given an opportunity to accept Jesus as the one true Messiah. If the Jews refuse, pretty likely, only then will they suffer the same damnation as other non-believers. To demonstrate the power and indeed the risk of this belief even today, we need look no further than the current nominee for ambassador to Israel. Mike Huckabee is an evangelical Baptist minister who accepts a conception of Christian Zionism in which total war in the Middle East, if not desirable, then certainly is necessary. These Christian Zionists want to see a U.S. policy consistent with a literal interpretation of the Bible, in which Jewish conquest over all of historic Palestine is a necessary precondition for the return of Christ and the ensuing end of days. But as noted, these Christian Zionists believe that upon the rapture, non-Christians, including Jews, who do not accept Jesus, will be condemned to hell. So we need to keep our eyes open. Not all who profess to support Israel do so in the interest of Jews. But on a more positive note, I believe that the most important difference between these competing images of the end times lies in the power of ordinary people to bring into being the Jewish Messianic age. For most Christians, the Messiah will come to sort things out only once humans have made a colossal mess of everything, thus requiring God's grace to be saved from the chaos and destruction that then reigns over the earth. In the Jewish mystical Messianic tradition, on the other hand, the Messiah will come not to judge, but to celebrate, when through the good works of individuals, humanity successfully has lifted the shards of God's light of creation and thus has repaired the world. The Shvirat HaKelim myth illustrates much about today's Parsha. Luria allows us to envision a God hidden among us in the shards and thus accessible and available to us through our acts of kindness, while still transcendent and beyond comprehension and thus inaccessible. Luria named the first of these aspects of God the Shekhinah, literally the aspect of God that dwells in a place. And the latter, Ein Sof, literally unending or without end. The most profound aspect of God that is well beyond human comprehension. To Luria, when we pray, it is the Shekhinah who listens. And so too in today's Parashat. We read, the cloud covered the Ohel Moed and Kavod Adonai filled the Mishkan. In other words, although God's presence abides among the Israelites, it is obscured by the cloud. So much so, in fact, that not even Moses could enter the Mishkan while the cloud hovered. But then we read, when the cloud went up from over the Mishkan, the Israelites would journey forward in all their journeyings. This wonderful image resonates fully with Lurianic thought. God's presence is always with us, but when it is hidden, either by an impenetrable cloud or in the broken, hidden shards of divine light, it is the incomprehensible Ein Sof, and forward movement is impossible. But when the cloud lifts, or an act of chesed redeems a spark, God's presence becomes accessible in the imminent Shekhinah, and we then can advance toward completing our ongoing task, whether it is to reach Canaan or to repair the world. Whether one believes or does not believe in a cloud-hidden God who accompanied our forebears, to Eretz Israel, indeed, whether one believes or does not believe in a divine presence at all, there is a meaningful lesson and some comfort to be found in today's Parsha. We all carry within us a cloud that obscures our humanity, a cloud that leaves us unmoved at the sight of a mother begging or an addict passed out on the street, a cloud that makes us react angrily to the slightest provocation. We all carry within us a cloud that obscures our ability to perceive the shards of light hidden in plain view all around us. And our clouds grow thicker and colder as we watch the world around us become more and more broken. But our Parsha teaches that only when the cloud lifts can we move forward. Only with that clarity can we see what is expected of us. And only in that light can we advance toward fulfilling those expectations. And the Ari teaches that it is wholly within our power to disperse our clouds, drop by drop, with each act of kindness that we do. And by making things just a bit clearer, each act of chesed makes the next one easier to see, and the one after that easier still. And in this way, by these small actions, we can accelerate, albeit in imperceptible increments, toward a repaired world. It matters not whether one thinks of that as reaching Canaan or redeeming the sparks, or simply as being fully human. What matters is that we each have the power to lift the cloud through the content of our actions. Yehi Ratzon, may it be within us to do so, to use that power wisely with kindness and generosity, to begin to repair this broken world.